Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, we have touched today on the economic illiteracy of Humza Yousafever and the SNP generally, but him in particular. And we've shown how he's just quite incapable of grasping how expenses and taxes and all this merge together to form a coherent, balanced budget. But the problem is actually way, way worse than anyone has ever imagined. And of course, part of it is we've also said about this in the past, that he has no spine, he has no balls. He is the Ken doll of politics because he just caves in. He never fights when people in the public sector want pay rises. He just goes, yeah, okay, because he doesn't want strikes. And the reason is because they're getting strikes in England. He goes, oh, look at us, we're not having strikes, we're much better. The only problem is that the people of Scotland are being forced to pay ever increasing amounts of tax to cover these very large pay rises. Now, I'm not saying that pay rises aren't due. Yes, of course, they must be, but they must be controlled. There must be some kind of sense and some leeway rather than just sort of folding like Superman on laundry day. And so we'll have a look at this to see how bad the situation is. And, you know, if you think it's bad, it's worse. Let's have a look. Right, so SNP's massive public sector wage bill is making public services unsustainable after a £1.7 billion pay deals. Audit Scotland said reforms were needed after the Scottish Government handed out far more in pay deals than initially planned. And that's because things like the doctors went, oh, we'll have that. And they went, okay, to give the doctor. And they didn't even bargain. They didn't bargain. They caved. And then this and then that. And then the union's there. And they all put their oar in. And they all got given what they wanted. Nobody said anything else. He caved in because he's a coward. He doesn't want to see strikes. He doesn't want to go, oh, look, we got a strike. Oh, we're the same as England because we can't afford it. Now, one of the problems you've got in Scotland, of course, is you've got 5.5 million people. And if you take off those in full-time education, the retired, the unemployed, the unemployable, those in receipt of other benefits, say, for example, carers, disabled, things like that, you've probably only got maybe, and if I'm being generous with the numbers here, maybe only 2.5 million people actually doing the work. 3 million at the most, yeah? Between 2.5 and 3 million people doing the actual work in Scotland. And that's not a very big tax base to pay for all the things that the SNP want to do. And the only reason the SNP can afford to do all this, of course, is because they're part of the union, and an awful lot of money comes up via the Barnett formula, amongst other things, from Westminster, from the bigger tax base that is England. And that's the only reason they can do it. Imagine if Scotland was an independent nation. It wouldn't be able to afford to do half the things it's doing. And the half it's doing now is bad because it's barely fundable. So imagine half the funds going in. It would be absolute chaos. It would be a failed state immediately. But of course, it's getting worse and worse. And what is particularly bad is of, let's say, 2.5 million people, just to keep the numbers easy, of the 2.5 million people in Scotland that are actually working, a full 10% of them are employed by the state, which means they're not actually generating any income. They are taking income from the state in form of their wages, but it's the state paying them. And so automatically you've only got 90% of the workers having to fund the whole of Scotland. It's a joke. How the hell do they think they can run an independent country? Especially when they can't say no to anyone who wants a pay rise. Anyway, the SNP government, and it's getting worse. Trust me, it gets worse. The more you read into this, you can see the worse it's going to get. And you can see here, in this really, is why even SNP supporters must see you cannot have an independent Scotland, because you quite simply could not pay the bills. The SNP government has been warned its massive public wage bill is threatening services in Scotland, with urgent reforms and better workforce planning needed in the coming months. Audit Scotland said the growing public sector wage bill will make services unsustainable without change. In a briefing paper, it said that these reforms must take place quickly and should not solely focus on controlling workforce numbers. Pay deals agreed for the current and previous financial years have ended up costing 1.7 billion more than planned. They're not costing 1.7 billion to give this pay rise. They've factored in a pay rise which was going to cost whatever it was going to cost, and 1.7 billion on top of that. This is at a time where they've already got a £1 billion black hole, and they're adding to it, and they might have another £500 million if he follows through on the council tax freeze, which he's unlikely to now. And he said that he's going to have an income tax freeze. More on that later, because I think that's already going to be reversed. And now he's got to find a further 1.7 billion, and that's just to keep services as they are. That's not to improve them in any way. Is it any wonder that the whole country's falling apart when you've got people this stupid running it? Anyway, and this is half the reason. The size of the devolved public sector workforce, all those, to define it, employed by the state, so not contributing into the country, but paid out of the country, has increased substantially, going from 150,000 full-time equivalent staff in 1999 to more than 245, nearly doubling, in the current financial year. And the report said reform is urgently needed to address budget shortfalls of more than 1 billion over the coming years. That's the billion as it is now, plus the 1.7 billion that they've promised in pay rises coming next year. Stephen Boyle, Auditor General for Scotland, said, and this is like the most senior civil servant dealing with budgetary requirements, right? There is no one higher than him in terms of dealing with this, unless you actually start getting down to the Cabinet Office in Westminster. But within Scotland, this is it. He said significant reform of the public sector, including its workforce, is needed to protect services over the long term. That means better workforce planning and wider changes to how staff work within and across organisations. An approach to reform purely focused on controlling workforce numbers will not address workforce pressures and is unlikely to balance the public finances. Also, if you start cutting the numbers but the work still needs to be done, either people will start dying, or the people who are actually doing the work will go off ill with stress, and the problem will get even worse. The Scottish Conservatives said new taxes should not be used to close the budget gap. Finance spokeswoman Liz Smith said, "This is a stark warning from the Auditor General to the SNP government that our essential public services risk becoming unaffordable due to the widening black hole in their finances." But then they can't be doing things like, let's stop free prescriptions. We got to have free buses for immigrants, free buses for that. Let's help the movement of illicit products around the country by giving children free bus passes. They can travel around for the country lines, for the county lines, people. You know, hey, let's waste money over there. Let's waste money here. Let's waste money on that. Let's keep doing this. All these things, all of them wrong. All of them wasteful. None of them sensible. None of them helpful. But hey, they're not picking up the tab. Only they may well start to, because the UK government has said they're not giving any more money until they have shown where they're spending the current money. And they don't want to do that. They've been told they have to, and they don't want to. This is coming out of Cabinet Office. They want full accountability. And the SNP are shitting themselves. They don't know what to do. Anyway, the large growth in the size of the Scottish Government workforce means that higher pay deals, agreed, will be a major component of the Scottish budget. Also, there's 110,000 to 120,000 a year can be saved just getting rid of the Minister of Independence. Why do we need him? Job for the boys, that one. And over 10 years, there you go. Over 8 years, in fact, that's £1 million. There you go. Saved you £1 million over the next 8 years. Get rid of him. Also, get rid of the 24 civil servants that work under him. Don't need them anymore if he's not there. Bang, another couple of million a year saved. Tell you, I'm not Quicksilver. I can save millions off your budget, me. Anyway, the SNP, which has received record funding from the UK government and has blown every penny of it, needs to be honest and transparent about how it intends to fund these. It can't be honest and transparent. We keep saying that. Honesty and transparency is the last thing you're going to get. Scottish Labour economy spokesman Daniel Johnson said the SNP had to come clean about their plans for Scotland's public sector workers. He added, the SNP's financial mismanagement has left us with a budget black hole And there is very, very real risk that workers' services will pay the price. The looming job cuts are threatening to wreak havoc with public services. Well, of course they will do. You start taking these people out. These people are doing a job which is absolutely, desperately, 100% massively needed because you want to save money. Meanwhile, there'll be 100 managers and you're still maintaining foreign embassies. People will die. Undoubtedly, people will die because of financial mismanagement by this SNP government and their inability to actually admit when they've made a mistake. That's half their problem. They can never admit it. And until they can start admitting they've made a mistake and sort of say, okay, we spent it there, we shouldn't have spent it there, we're going to spend it here instead, and get a grip on it, it's never going to change. And until that man grows a hefty pair of balls, which he hasn't got yet, and says to these unions, no, you've had a good pay rise last year, this year we can't afford it, you get 3%, that's the best as we can go. And they go, we'll go on strike, and say, go on strike. God, don't flow, let them go. If you can't run an economy just by caving every time, everything's got to be negotiation. But he can't negotiate because he hasn't got a spine. He's a jellyfish in a suit. Anyway, I'll try it up and come up and we'll finish the video. Trouble is, you've got 2.5 years of this yet. How much more money are they going to waste left, right and centre on failures, on waste, on things that aren't necessary? People will die. This is going to happen. Whoever comes over, and this is deliberate policy, you understand, because whoever comes next won't have a brass farthing to try and fix things. They'll have to start from scratch. They'll have to abandon a lot of things. It'll make them look unpopular. I mean, personally, I would start by just saying, well, there's no pay rises for anyone. We've got to just get this going. So you've got what you got. You're going to have to deal with it for now. Secondly, I'll get rid of universal free prescriptions. I'd say anyone who's working and earning, and let's say earning over X, pick a number, you have to pay for your prescriptions. And if you're the sort of person who has multiple prescriptions, fine, you buy your annual pass and get it for £10 a month. It's not a problem, but you're contributing something. That gets rid of one. Secondly, free education. Okay, if you're going to have to start charging for universities, fine. If you want to keep it low, maximum fine. But bring some money into them. All sorts of little things that you can do. Chip here, chip there, chip away. Bang, bang, bang. Certainly get rid of everyone involved with independence. Get rid of your foreign embassies. Get rid of your spin doctors. The lot. And start living within your means. If you were living if it was coming out your back pocket, you'd be bankrupt. You'd be bankrupt twice. And they don't care because they seem to think that if they destroy the country entirely, the next people go in, make such a bad repair job that they can come back in again and go, look at us, we're going to lead you to the new utopia. Dangerous people. Anyway, I shall stop there and come up. And I have literally, as I'm finishing, you will probably see what I've just seen because I'm probably going to still do a flash video on this. So you've probably already seen what I've seen because this will probably come up before this video here comes up. But anyway, I'll do that. I'm just going to do that flash video now and just get it out. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Do take care and I will speak to you later.